See? Yes. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I've been thinking a little bit. I mean, I come from Norway, and we've had some very positive. Our flag has been up here a few times during the day in a very positive manner. And not to be arrogant, but we don't have a problem with financial inclusion in Norway. In fact, we have the opposite. We have financial over-inclusion. The worry of the National Bank and the government now is that people are overbanked. They take more credit than they should because it's so easily available. So, but I've been thinking, is there anything, any advice, anything from my country that you could still, I can offer some advice to you? And I think there's at least three things that's partly why it's been so successful. One has been mentioned today, that's digital identity, because it's very hard to have financial inclusion if you don't have identity inclusion. And to be honest, I mean, when India can have biometric digital identity for close to 1 billion people, anyone can do it. So just make it happen, basically, right? The other one, which has also been mentioned today, is cooperation, interoperability. And I'm glad to say that the banks in Norway have been cooperating for decades. They've understood that the underlying infrastructure, that's not where you compete. Everything should be interoperable between banks. And then you compete on the customer interface on top of that, and on the products and on the pricing. And that's why it's been over the years so easy. You don't have to care about which bank the other party has. All cards works in all banks. You can pay all bills across any bank. You can even move your mortgage from one bank to another just by a click, almost. And there was a discussion on interoperability here today, but I didn't hear that the two banks wanted to cooperate, right? They wanted to cooperate with MasterCard and Visa and so on, but you have to start cooperating with each other. And that's a win-win situation in the long run. The third thing to mention is price. We're now basically a cashless society, and the reason is it's almost for free to do payments. The cost for a merchant to do one payment at the pass is 1 euro cent for the big, right? So even buying a coffee or a newspaper, you use your card or contactless, you don't need cash anymore. But unfortunately then MasterCard and Visa, I know you're the sponsors, but this 2-3% commission doesn't work. So we're going to have a panel to discussing a little bit across the world, what are the experiences? And of course, every country is different, so you can't copy, but there's still things to be learned from what others have been doing. And the technology innovation going on has also made it much easier these days to actually, I think, have financial inclusion, and typically based on the mobile phone going forward. So let me try to introduce my panel without offending them too much, because this is about 7 different languages and I try to say their names. And the first one, maybe you know, is from Renome Smart here in Ukraine. That's Valery Shirostan.
Close enough.
Please enter the stage and have a seat. Also from Ukraine, Inga Andreeva, which is the country manager from MasterCard from Ukraine and Moldova. And then the most international man we have here, Malith Gunasekara. He's actually not from India, as you see in the program. He's from Sri Lanka, and he's going to tell us about experience not from India, but from Indonesia, Mexico, Bosnia, and other countries. Very exciting to hear about that. And now, running here in the very last minute, Svetlana Shrivna, which is the visa manager for Ukraine, Belarus, and Moldova. Please on the side. Thank you. And I'm glad to introduce Gökhan Özalan from Turkcell in Turkey. And I've been a little bit surprised because this is the first mobile operator on the stage today. And I think not just the national bank government and banks, and payment providers, but the mobile operators are a key enabler to make this happen. I think so. And now, traveling all the way from Kenya, we have two participants, Archit Rao, coming from Express Automation in Kenya, and last but not at all the least, Rachel Nguli from M-Pesa. And we heard about M-Pesa this morning, right? Which is really the product and the experience that triggered this whole thing all around the world. Everybody's heard about M-Pesa. So we're very anxious to hear, what on earth did you do to make it so successful? So that was my introduction. What we now will have is a 10-minute maximum introduction from each of the speakers. I might ask you a question afterwards, and we'll open for question at the end from the audience as well. So Valerie, please start. And I think you'll be talking in Ukrainian, right? So those of you who need the headsets, it's a good idea to turn them on now.
Ага, все, працює. Доброго дня, шановні колеги.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. We spoke about this forum with the National Bank, and I told the guys in the National Bank about one project of ours. We could see that it resembles and it's relevant to financial inclusion, so we thought we should discuss it seriously with the National Bank. We are a for-profit organization. We're not just trying to go for financial inclusion. It is the business of the regulator. We're looking out for a niche and ways of making some money in that niche. So we started searching for the niche, and we could see that we can find it in the unbanked population. And typically you find this population in villages of this country. In those villages, you don't get enough infrastructure typically, and over the last several years, some of the banks left the rural areas of this country. In little villages, there are no key players left any longer which can help you with financial services. So we thought it could be the right niche for us to try and do something there. If banks are missing there for the last several years, you don't know where it's at in that village, what those people need, what do they use, are they aware of financial services or not. So we started touting for business in rural areas, and we needed to find a partner, a player of a kind, which is established in that village. The hardest thing is to build the infrastructure. Even mobile operators in this country would fail to bring 3G services down to the villages of the country. So we cannot assume that people will be using everything they need payments-wise on the smartphone, or at least cell phone. So we started looking for a partner, and we tried to see if we can find one in the village. We could think of the local post office because they keep in touch with the village in some way. What are the other options? That's a question for the audience. Who could be our partner apart from the post office? Oschod Bank is not there in the villages. Oschod Bank is mostly concentrated in towns, but they do not go down to villages. But that's 14 million population living there. Privat Bank doesn't do it either. Some people can go to towns in order to make payments there, but not everybody does that. There are also local stores in villages. And sometimes it's not just a store. if you try and think of it, it doesn't look good, it looks kind of shabby and dilapidated, but typically it might have some ties with other players in the market. There is an association which covers 14,000 stores, marketplaces, restaurants, farmers, and right now it is present in the village like that. Even, well, in some villages you have less than 200 people and they go there. Villages from 200 and more people is not of interest to that association. So they try to operate in the smallest of villages, and we started a dialogue with that player, and it's been an interesting thing for both sides. So they cover lots of small stores and they do not carry a lot of goods. On the other hand, they would like to do something in order to compete against Ukrainian Post, because typically the post office offers some services to residents and nobody else. So we started off this dialogue trying to see what should be done. We may bring along a terminal, but that's not going to be a solution. People do not have cards, or too few have cards, and they won't be able to use the terminal. Who has cards in villages? Doctors, medics, because they get their paycheck on the cards, and then every month they have to go to the nearest town in order to withdraw their paycheck from the card, and then they can do some shopping. But our idea was to try and work with the people who are not so much involved in the format of communication like that in the financial sector. So we, as I said, decided to go to the villages. We are preparing a pilot project somewhere in fall. This coming fall we're gonna start it in 12 villages of Ternopil region. The idea is this: we understand that wouldn't want to start with loans. It's a risky business. Although some banks are ready to consider this option as partners and they could help us with that. But we would like to start with transactions, financial services. It's not going to be enough, but it's going to be a good starter. So apart from transactions, we would like to come up with the electronic shelf, as he puts it. Let me tell you more about that. In the local store, we would like to use a self-service machine. So a local resident will be able to use the rural marketplace, and we invite the existing companies which operate in towns. So we invite bloggers, DIY, and experts in electronics, and those who trade in children's goods products. This is something that local residents need the most. In order to buy, they typically go to nearest towns. And the second thing we can offer is transactions. But they will be done differently in village settings. There is a well-known project in this country which is done together with a Silpo chain store. You can pay in Silpo for your purchase, and you can fill your cell phone account at the same time. We don't want to install cash dispensers in these stores, and it's not going to be a profitable thing. Instead of that, we can bring some hardware to the village, and it's going to be also a training tool for us, because typically literacy is missing in those places. And that machine will be placed somewhere in the middle of the village. Typically in a village, there are two places people typically go to: the store and the village hall. So people will be trusting the store, and that's important. And we're going to use that. So we're going to install the self-service machine. We will train the sales clerks, and they will be motivated. We'll work with the association in order to offer some incentive to the sales clerks, because in the village people are conservative and nobody would do things for free. But if you incentivize the sales clerks, and then you can use the post terminal. This post terminal may not be the most interesting thing out of all that, but still it could give us something in that village. And you will be able to try and promote cashless transactions. I think that's enough for now, and this project will be continued.
That could be applicable here in Ukraine as well. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay. I just would like to say thank you so much to the National Bank of Ukraine and to other partners of this great event for this really great event. And finally, it's already multinational. We already speak several languages, and it's what we say in MasterCard, it's priceless. And I still believe that majority are Ukrainian people. That's why I'll switch into Ukrainian language, but cannot. I need a clicker. Because I have slides. Thank you so much. Thank you. Добре, дякую ще раз. Фінансова включеність впливає на рівень розвитку країни, а також і на рівень життя населення.
Lives of people. International studies suggest that the improved financial inclusion promotes the growth of the GDP by 0.3% if the inclusion improves by 10%. In this country, it's going to be more than 9 billion hryvnia. I think it's a substantial amount. MasterCard is a global payment system. It operates in 30,000 banks across the world. In this country, we are a partner of all issuing banks, acquirers, and thousands of outlets. Together with partners, we build an ecosystem helping the people of this country become a part of financial services. What do we do with those partners? We establish smart city solutions, which feature transportation solutions. We also think of acceptance, infrastructure, accepting cards, e-commerce, online commerce, and with partners, we also provide cashless territories across diverse festivals, and we do it jointly with partners using innovative solutions and products of the MasterCard system. Over the last 4 years, we have been able to launch more than 30 projects within the smart city concept, and it's not just transportation solutions. If we speak of transport, the list of this project is long. 4 years ago, we began working in the Kiev subway. Jointly with Oshchod Bank, we launched this project. Right now, the system of contactless payments works in funiculars, high-speed trams, and other types of terrestrial transport. We keep on working with other infrastructure facilities, not just transport, because the idea is to allow the citizens to use pay cards wherever they have spend some leisure time and in recreational facilities. In Kiev subway, you get more than 65 million contactless transactions. And we keep monitoring this situation to see which way this trend is going. If somebody uses the payment card in transport and it belongs to daily expenses, then people start using the pay card outside the transportation solutions twice as often. So transport is something that shapes up this habit. Among the most recent projects, I'd like to highlight some, like the launch of Funicular Botanic Garden. We have acceptance infrastructure there, Intercity electric train, and Sofievka Park in Uman. We also create cashless territories. Last year alone, we got more than 10 various festivals in this country. This year is going to be just as many. In those festivals, these territories allow us to shape the habit to pay cashlessly. If you don't have cash, you can use the card and you can make a payment right there on the spot. In Central and Eastern Europe, we did the Digitalization Trust survey, and we could see that the respondents were the account owners which use online, so they are included in the financial system. 87% of respondents choose payments through a smartphone because it's convenient. 96% of respondents already have smartphones. That's 9% higher compared to 2016. This country has become the second country in terms of use in various mobile payment applications. We can also see that there has been a change in the trend. We love smartphones, and a few years ago, we would actively use browsers on personal computers and laptops, but these days, we manage personal finance using mobile phones. 67% of respondents say that using a smartphone is a lot more convenient. So as we speak about the number of payments, we are still the leader, and we hit the top 5 countries of the world in terms of the number of NFC transactions in MasterCards. We looked at SMEs and how they are doing in this regard. 38% of SMEs accept cashless payments in this country. In Europe, it is 62%. Speaking of terminals per 1 million residents, this country is bringing up the rear in the rankings of Central and Eastern European countries. Per million of residents, you get slightly less than 7,000 POS terminals. In Europe, it is 18,000. 37% of adults in this country still do not have a bank account. According to various estimates, in this gray area you get 30 to 50% of our economy. What can we do as MasterCard? We try and simplify the user experience so that users would feel more comfortable using services of payment systems and financial services. We actively work towards introducing global mobile solutions for SMEs. We have MasterCard identity check technologies. In online commerce, they allow you to get 97% of confirmed transactions. We also work on biometrics like Face ID or fingerprint, or behavioral passive biometrics of behavioral kind. Plus, you get the Internet of Things. That's a global trend. It is something we work on so much. Another survey has been conducted in the Ukraine, and it shows that 74% of Ukrainians believe that it's more convenient to pay with a card. 88% say that learning to do this is very easy, but only 54% actually use the card. Speaking of online, it goes down to 48%. 39% of them know how to pay utility bills online. Speaking of financial inclusion, we also need to think of education programs. And as a payment system, we're actively supporting those jointly with partnering banks. Junior Bank, Olympics of Financial Genius, and we did an education program with Privan Bank, Teenager Conference. We did it together with Oshut Bank and many other things. This year we tried a new format and we supported it. It was a teenager festival video Jura. Alright, I understand my time is almost up. So that's what has been done, that's what is being done, and that's what we're dreaming about to be continued.
Thank you very much. I'm actually very glad to say that for this forum you have not invited any banks from Western Europe, because what the banks in Western Europe have been doing for years is daylight robbery. I mean, they have an old legacy system with outrageous fees and a cumbersome way of doing banking. So that's not, whatever you do, don't copy that. I mean, I have a bank account in France, and I don't have time now to tell you how cumbersome it was to open it and how expensive it is to use it. But perhaps there are other countries around the world, Malith, where you have experience that could be learned and perhaps could be applicable also in Ukraine. Please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. First of all, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, I think. I'm pleased to be back after 2 years to Ukraine. I used to be the advisor to the cashless economy project of the National Bank of Ukraine. And I would first of all thank NBU for inviting me back. Now, to answer your question, transaction cost is something that you need to look at, especially when you start bringing in technology for financial inclusion, or for that matter, even for banking. This has always been a case, and a lot of people have not adopted or got into financial services because of the cost. Especially when you talk about financial inclusion, you're looking at the bottom of the pyramid to bring them into the society where they have access to finance. So you need to make sure that the cost is pretty less. Let me take you through my experience working in multiple countries. Though I'm Sri Lankan, I've been traveling and developing strategies for digital financial services, as well as doing implementations. I don't believe in just doing strategies. I do believe in doing implementations and making sure that what we preach works at the end of the day. There have been a lot of challenges, so I will share some of the successes as well as the failures. Now, a lot of people think that technology is the answer to everything. I mean, most of us are seated here from the technology side. That used to be, I thought it used to be the saying about 10 years ago, but unfortunately it is the case yet. Everybody thinks that technology can, sort a lot of the problems. When you talk about financial inclusion, more than technology, one of the most important things is to look at what is required in a country or institution, even a banking institution, if they want to provide these type of services. what is the actual requirement of the people of that country. And it changes from one country to the other. It doesn't stay the same. I have seen, there's my friend from M-Pesa who is here. They tried to implement the same M-Pesa model in a few other countries, and it was utter failure. And the people who tried doing that lost millions of dollars. So that's why I keep saying, even for Ukraine, what you need to do is look at the country dynamics, what is the real requirements, connectivity issues, regulations. There's also trust factor in the financial system. I don't need to go down into details how the financial industry evolved in the last 3 to 5 years. These are some of the factors that you need to look at. And then my friend spoke about connectivity and how you take it to the rural areas. I call it the rails. What are the rails that you can use? Now over here, I think it was one of the things that you could use is obvious Ukkorposta, which is I think the right way to go, because they did have branches as well as in almost all the villages. But at the same time, when I was here 2 years ago, we started looking at bringing in the mobile money players into the market. MasterCard and Visa was already there, but the mobile money players in terms of the 3 major telcos in the country. And we managed, we were successful enough to get some of the legislation through, working with the NBU. And now I hear that the wallets are available. I mean, how you take it to the people, how you take that message to the people is a different issue. Then also we need to talk about the taxation and all the service fees that comes in. I'm sure, again, the Kenyan experience will be shared today by one of my colleagues who's sitting here in the panel. That's an interesting one. And again, taxation in terms of not only the taxation, again, you're talking about anti-money laundering. There are so many other regulations that you need to bring in to ensure that this is implemented properly. I'll quickly, I know my time is limited. I'm going to quickly dive into the countries that I worked. Let me talk about Indonesia. It's a huge country. At high tide, there are 17,000 islands. At low tide, it goes down to 14,000. 3,000 islands disappear. So you can just imagine the challenges that you have. The country, the breadth is about bigger than the US, right? So the connectivity is a huge issue. When you talk about financial literacy, you go on the street and ask them, do you use internet? Everybody says, no, we don't use it. So but you go and ask them, do you use Facebook? Yes, yes, I do use Facebook. And, you know, they show you all the pictures that they had taken and, you know, what you call posted, what they ate for lunch and stuff like that. And it's, I think, one of the top 5 Facebook users in the world, right? So, again, technology has to be used based on each market condition. That's basically what I want to say here. We ran a mobile money project. Again, the central bank has to, you know, work pretty hard and work with market needs, with market trends, which doesn't happen in most countries. I have seen a very robust South Asian central bank, which has kept pace with the development. But these are some of the things that I think NBU as well as other central banks in this region should learn from. The other example, I think I'm running out of time. I'll talk about Mexico. I did a project with one of the largest credit unions in the country. And when we looked at the customer demographics, I mean, technology is easy to fix, provided you get it right. But we found out that when you look at the customer demographics, most of them were pensioners. So how do you get pensioners to use digital financial services? This was a challenge. And most of them, they like to come once a week or once a month to the branch to pick up their pension and talk to the teller And they do also have a separate gaming room where they play cards, they smoke cigars, and this is the time for them to socialize. Now, is digital financial services or these type of applications, will it work in an environment like that? So what we had to do is we had to completely change the strategy in terms of how we want to implement it, and then we took it, looked at a new customer segment which was below 35. So these are some of the things that you have to do. In terms of implementing technology solutions, what I tell everybody is that do it fast. Please don't take long. And if you want to fail fast, you might as well fail fast, right? And then correct it and go forward. So with that, I'm going to stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Malith. I was very glad to hear during the day that Ukraine, you're very high up in the percentage of contactless payments. Better than most other countries in Europe, actually. And that also reminds me that even though you're low percentage on some other numbers of financial inclusion, it gives you the opportunity to leapfrog into state of the art, because you don't have that much legacy and you don't have to convert people from one product to another. And that reminds me well, it must be 15 years ago, when all the card companies in Europe were trying to switch from magnetic stripe to chip cards. And do you know which country in Europe, well, whether it's Europe or not is debatable, which country was the first where it was only chip cards acceptable? And I was working for a company doing card processing software, amongst other things, at that time. That was Azerbaijan. A project with the National Bank of Azerbaijan, because they didn't have a legacy. People didn't have cards, so they could go directly to chip cards. Now you have the possibility to go directly to contactless payments on the mobile and so on. Skip all the other things. Perhaps you can even go directly to cashless. Or are there any other state of the art? But I'm sure, Svetlana, Visa can help you go directly to state of the art, right?
Thank you so much. Ну, по-перше, дякую за таку гарну підводку. Тобто в мене є багато можливостей висказати.
Well, thank you for the teaser. There is a lot I could tell you about that. But I would like to say that I'm happy to see so many of you in here. I can see some familiar faces. I can see people which work in different domains. But right now, we all together are in here and we take part in a modern ecosystem of payment technologies. We're talking fintech, insurtech, the use of big data, artificial intellect. There are people from different projects. Infrastructure is also mentioned here. I appreciate the presentation on that. So, recently, we have been able to see new emerging technologies emerging very quickly. We can see new solutions from payment systems, fintechs, or in insurance sector. And we should not just be focused on technologies themselves. We need to rather get focused on the experience, user experience it brings along, or they bring along. When we try a new technology, we gain a certain experience, and after that we know how to use the technology. And these days, we have heard a lot about experience, trust, and penetration of services. I'd like to add to that something else. It is client user experience. All of the proposals should be seamless, and that's what the clients want these days. And as we offer these solutions, we need to remember that clients should be trained. A few years ago, we would tell the clients what is a card. Nowadays, we're telling them other things like security, how to store the data, what's the best way of making a particular payment, how can you save funds, especially if we talk about SMEs. So that experience matters a lot, and we understand the target audience, and I think it's one of the key factors behind our success today. We'll also do a lot of surveys. It's not just about the end users. We also keep in touch with SMEs. And I'd like to quote a few interesting numbers here. 92% of respondents aged 37-39, the millennials, say they would like to learn more than they know right now about financial services, financial sector. 86% say they know and can do some things, but still they think they do not know enough about this. And that's an interesting discovery too. Speaking of technological solutions, we always need to remember that 91% or so, well, let's say more than 90% of people over 30 use applications, and they also use smartphones. So the solutions that we offer in terms of knowledge and financial inclusion and literacy have to take it on board. Maybe this should include gamification, maybe some other stuff like that, but it should be done differently, not the way it was done several years ago. There have been interesting developments. Ukraine hits top 7 according to Visa. They said top 5, but I think we are definitely in the top 10 in the world in terms of the number of tokenized transactions. We are among the top 3 countries in terms of contactless technologies that are used, so these findings clearly suggest we're moving in big strides and we've got potential. There are some solutions that come to us from payment systems. If we speak about tomorrow's technologies in terms of identification, the customers are ready. 96% of Ukrainians believe that a fingerprint or face recognition can work. These are the kinds of solutions that are going to be safe and they will be used. And we did some surveys on that. We spoke a lot about the number of terminals, the need to install them. They spoke about 7,000 or 18,000 of those, but in tomorrow's world, it's not so important. As I said, the cost of transaction is one of the things that drives technologies in this world. So companies presented, last week they presented a new solution which is called Tap to Phone. It's an innovative payment solution. So it makes your smartphone a payment terminal. So we're not going to need terminals tomorrow because we'll be able to make payments through the card and even through the phone. We can talk about lots of other things, but that's an existing solution now, and it's going to help SMEs save on the fees of terminals, and it's just a starting point in changes that we're going to see in these technologies. Speaking of identification data, We have a solution that is working out there today, and I'm speaking about the project which was presented in the end of May. Partner CAS and Privat Bank, they proposed a face recognition solution in case of payments. There are lots of things which can help improve the client's experience, and they can make the whole thing more convenient so that payments could be done quickly and efficiently. So I think in the nearest future, the financial literacy will depend on the kinds of solutions we're going to offer, and it will depend on how we're going to train the clients in using those technologies. Younger generation, our kids, may not have to hold a plastic card in their hands. I think it's going to be a digital card. It's just a matter of time. Whether it's going to happen 3, 5, maybe 10 years down the road, it's just a matter of time. Would like to keep in the top 10 in this regard in the world. And eventually there's going to be digital cards that are going to be stored in our phones, and many people in this country will be able to do it like that. But 38% in this country remain uncovered by the financial sector, and I think it's a good idea to do this project in the villages, the one that you told us about, and we have to work jointly trying to find the kinds of solutions which would allow us to work together in finding most appropriate solutions. And finally, I'd like to mention one more thing. In the breaks, people come up to me and speak about different things, but I can see they care. They work in the education sector, and they understand that our education sector is lagging behind. So these people would like to learn more about these things, and we fixed a meeting in order to get together and discuss all that. I appreciate the readiness and openness of the education system in this country. In schools, it could be one lesson per month about financial literacy, and that would have been a great deal. So I think children will need to get a better idea, and when we do service, we understand that kids are smart and they can communicate with the rest of the world. Thank you.
And you were lucky because the timer didn't start until you were 2 minutes in. So, but anyway, but Gökhan, I don't know if you noticed, but this is a conference for bankers, and somehow you've been sneaking in here coming from a mobile operator. So what on earth can a telephony type of company provide that would actually address the issue of financial inclusion? Please.
Well, thank you for the first, for the beginning, for the great event and for the invitation to discuss such a fruitful event and have this conversation. Yeah, telcos. I mean, we are especially bankers in the basis, like serving for financial services, let's say, for our countries and for our customers. But what does telcos do in this new era? Let's say, is that the financial ecosystem is now kind of shifting to a new age, to a new era, because the old banking institutions or the regulatory environment is kind of shifting. There's this new age of open banking kind of way, which also provides a great infrastructure and a great environment for the fintech companies as well. That's why telcos has already a huge potential, especially using their own, I don't know, user bases, let's say. For our case in Turkey, in Turkcell, we are more than 35 million customers in a telco environment, and which is like almost half of the population of Turkey. In this case, if you already have this base, it's easier to get them into your financial services bases as well, because it doesn't make such an effort for them to create new leads, get new acquisitions for the customers, and so on. So that's why we believe that telcos have a huge potential, especially on this new era, let's say, and especially for this acquisition of new customers or new potential users for this fintech ecosystem the basis is using the mobile money or e-money, as you may say. Even if you offer different financial services, you always rely on this basic e-money services, let's say, because if you want to have an account to be offered to them for the end users, you always need to offer them in a basis of e-money. And for e-money business, we are running this operation in Turkcell a couple of years from now on, and we believe that we saw that there are 3 different dimensions or aspects for a successful financial services business to be run in a different environment, like a telco, let's say. The first one would be, as I would say, is the affordability. Like for the affordability, if you want to, the unbanked population, which is close to Ukraine in Turkey as well, it's around 36-35% of the population doesn't use any bank or any bank account or card or etc. That's why if you want to get them and get in touch with them, especially if you're going to for the poorer for the first 40% of the population, the unbanked population rate goes up to almost 50%. And if you want to gain them, if you want to serve them with a specific product, you should be offered the service in an affordable way. You cannot just charge overdraft fees, you cannot charge different transaction fees, etc., etc. This is already something that push people away from the current system of the banks, because in our new world, because the people are afraid of the banks just because of their fees. And if you are providing these services without much fees or any fee at all, then people are more and more eager to use your services. I would maybe say that there's a huge example in China, as Greta mentioned earlier today. Alibaba started offering this service, these e-money services, back in 2011 and 2012. Back then, China's poor population, like 40% of the population, almost 50% of them didn't have any bank account or anything else. Sorry, it's 70%. And then once they started using these kind of e-money services, the banked population or financial services user population grew to 70%. Then that's a huge step up for them, and this is also an important case for them to offer financial services. They started giving small loans. They started giving interest rates to even small amounts of money. Back then, banks were refusing them. They didn't give them any interest. If you don't give less than 1,000 USD, then there's no interest for you. But the Alibaba or Ant Financial, that you may say, told them that if you have $10 or $5, whatever you can think of, we are giving you an interest. That's how they kind of reach in the world with their different investments. And so today they reached more than 1 billion users across the world, and that's a huge number. And that's why we believe that it should be also be used in our ecosystem as well. And for the PaySell side, as our fintech company, let's say, we didn't go with a regular banking service providing kind of approach, let's say. We went with a closer approach to the end user. We said, we are not a pro bank, we are a bro bank. We kind of acted just like their friends. And in like 18 months, we sold more than 1.8 million prepaid cards to our end users that started using new prepaid cards or their cards for e-money services. They started giving out to their children. They started using for e-commerce. Housewives who didn't have any bank accounts started using this card to make online purchases or even for their daily shopping, let's say. The second one, the second important pillar is that the accessibility as well. If you cannot offer these services to your customers in a both online and offline locations, then it's not a sane business to go on with. If you don't offer the service in a mobile banking app or mobile financial services app, there's no need to run and try to catch them on. If you start giving these kind of services, these kind of applications, you should give them every possible services, financial services, if for their daily needs, for their financial needs, whatever you can think of. It kind of gives them a motivation to use your application, your channel, to give more and more data of their own, so that you can also use this data to give their credits, their credit score, whatever you can think of. And the second one would be also the use of physical channels, especially for this accessibility side. Let me say that in Turkey there are almost 10,000 bank branches that runs operations for their financial services. But by the end of this year, based on our physical retail locations and other institutions, we will be reaching 15,000 locations in Turkey all around the country. This is quite important for them to reach your financial services. If they don't see you out there, you cannot also gain them to an online ecosystem or online platforms as well. And the third one, for a successful e-money or, let's say, digital financial services platform, the regulation is a must as well. The regulation that supports a infrastructure that kind of links you with banks or different financial institutions, tech companies, to work in a cooperation, but also keeping the competition up. Especially now in the world, there are two different sites that are using two different regulation, let's say. On Europe, just like your country in Knut, in Norway, there's this PSD2 regulation going on, which kind of gives the fintech companies or different institutions all of the financial services provided by the banks, and it's a huge step ahead. This way, which will affect banks, especially in Europe, it will affect cumbersome banks to be gone in like 5 years. A recent research by A.T. Kearney says that 1 in 10 banks in Europe will fail within 5 years just after running this PSD2 regulations, because people doesn't work with these cumbersome banks or the people that offers these kind of services. And on the Asian side, there's also a similar approach, but what they are doing is not trying to, especially in China, they're not trying to build this online one-to-one interactions, but the central bank creates their own platform that tries to give links to WeChat, to Alipay, or whatever you can think of. That they're kind of centralizing, monitoring the platforms, which kind of be also a big need for the Chinese government as well. And for our side, as we are already having a business going on in Ukraine as well, with Lifestyle in PaySell as well. We will be soon launching our PaySell application and PaySell prepaid cards in Ukraine in quite soon, and we will be trying to offer our experience, our expertise on Turkish economy or Turkish business, and try to offer these services for the especially unbanked and underbanked people here to use great services. Let's say thank you.
Yes, thank you, Gökhan. And you mentioned Alipay. That was mentioned earlier today as well. But if you put aside the issues of maybe it's a monopoly, data privacy and so on, it's quite amazing what they've been able to do. And if you haven't, I recommend go to YouTube and watch a small video for 3 minutes called What is Alipay? It's quite amazing, and it's actually 3 years old, so a lot of development has happened after that. But they're not trying to make a banking application. They're trying to make the global lifestyle super app. Think about that. It's a lot of practical things, what people, so they try to solve real life issues. Because as one said earlier today, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to do some banking today. So now we heard from the mobile operator, and I read, I think it was last week, Economist, that what is driving the penetration of mobile phones? Because much more people on Earth have mobile phones than they have bank accounts. And what is driving it is actually, surprise, gaming. Even poor people want to be entertained. No, it's true. And gaming was mentioned earlier in the previous panel from museum in Romania and so on. So think about gaming. Maybe that is something that could be added a little bit more. I know you're bankers, you're not playing games, right? But particularly on this issue of financial literacy that was discussed, maybe some games, a way of getting attention from people. So I don't know, Archith, in Kenya, if you're playing games or what are you doing, but you're so successful in Africa in this area of financial inclusion.
I guess everyone's playing Candy Crush. Thank you. Thank you for my partners, the sponsors, and everyone here. I'd like to give it on a different point of perspective. I work for a company called Express Automation. We are a banking automation. We are a banking automation solution company. So we are in the private sector, delivering services to the banks and to other organizations. The numbers that we've seen here in terms of what Ukraine's been able to achieve and what we have in Kenya are quite different. We were talking about the number of terminals that are available for cash points, ranging to about 60,000 units in Ukraine, for example. In Kenya, we have about 3,000 ATMs that serves a population of about 45 million people. That basically means you have to walk very far to get to an ATM. Yeah. So having that in itself makes it really difficult to have that touch point for accessing payments. As an organization that deals across the country, and this means that getting to a 500-kilometer distance could take anywhere between 5 hours to 15 hours to 3 days. You've only gone 500 kilometers. The element of what I sit here as a benefit of what financial inclusion has done, with what mobile money has done, and with what was said earlier, that we bypassed many stages of technology. We did not have the great coverage of the cards. We did not have that technology per se. We jumped many ages in financial inclusion. So I'll give you a scenario. We have engineers who traverse the whole country. They take in their hand, for example, $100 and they go. I might not see that engineer for maybe 1 week. That $100 might finish in 3 days. What do? My work needs to be done. I cannot afford for him to come back, to go back 500 kilometers to finish off his job. Now, unfortunately, Rachel's here, who's going to talk about M-Pesa afterwards, but I'll tell you what the benefit has become. I am able to now send money for him who's sitting there 500 kilometers away in an instant. I don't have to send it with somebody who I don't trust. I don't have to, the risk element reduces as a business person. I want that work to be done so that I can invoice and I get paid quickly. The bottom line in this element is for me to make sure I get my money turned around quickly. So with the benefit of M-Pesa and our mobile money, I won't even only say M-Pesa, but just generally mobile money, allows me that flexibility to send money across anywhere within Kenya. The second part of it is the government side of life. I think as a private company, the interaction that we have in terms of mobile money and any other platform makes it easier for organizations like us to interact with government. I think that in the African states that we come out of East Africa especially, we have this negative perception of dealing with the government. We see it as long lines, we have to pay taxes, and when tax deadline is there, it takes us queues. It takes us weeks. Systems don't work. when everything becomes online and digital, it allows companies like us to finish off that job and concentrate on what we are good at, trying to make profit. And this is where I think, in terms of financial inclusion, I believe that when we don't have touch points, when we're forced into a corner to figure out how else to do what we need to do, we come up with ideas like M-Pesa and trying to utilize it. Yes, the transaction cost might be higher, but guess what? I'm able to finish off my work. I'm able to get that job done so that I'm able to invoice and get paid for it. So back to what you mentioned. How do we do this? I think we treasure efficiency, and we want things to be done now, get it done quick. Yes, it might cost a bit more, but as long as the work is done and I'm able to control that spend as a private entity, that's all I need. And our digital and our e-wallets and just generally our mobile money platform is what allows us to become more efficient. On the selfish side, as soon as I put myself onto the M-Pesa platform, I open up my market to my 45 million population. I can sell anything and they can interact with me directly, because they can pay me directly, not through any middleman who will add a profit onto it. So if I sell a bottle of water, they can directly transact with me and I supply the water. It's that simple. So all of a sudden I fall into their reach point, their touch point. And that is what I believe makes it click for what Kenya is able to achieve. And we are one of those companies that sit there and are reaping that benefits. Yes, we might not have the touch points of the ATM. We might not have the card saturation, so to speak, in terms of Visas or MasterCard. But then we do have that availability of that population. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And when you say that you avoid the middleman making a profit on the way, that reminds me of a very interesting story I read a couple of weeks ago, because the last speaker today is M-Pesa, who's been copied successfully and unsuccessfully in other countries. But one country where they have it, it's called M-Pesa, almost the same, was in Afghanistan. And they started paying people directly to their mobile wallet, for instance, the policeman. And what happened was, first they were very happy, and then they were very angry. And why? Because first they got their salary directly on the phone and said, oh, I have a salary raise, this is much more than I used to get. And then they found out why, because people had been skimming on their salary through the hierarchy in the police force. Approximately 30% was in the pocket of their bosses and 70% to the policeman. And that's an issue that you haven't touched upon earlier today. I mean, Melanie Williams from Jamaica said people are a bit reluctant because the government has transparency and then you have to pay taxes. But to avoid all the corruption and other people trying to steal your money is much easier when you have these electronic digital tools than when you operate with cash. So, our final speaker, this fantastic product that everyone has heard of from Kenya, M-Pesa. What have you done to make it so successful?
Well, thank you for having me, Rachel. Well, everyone, the organizers, and Ukraine, very beautiful country, by the way. So M-Pesa, everyone hears M-Pesa. I'll just give a very brief history of what it is. So M-Pesa started 12 years ago. We are almost a teenager. And as my panelists have mentioned, when you're creating a solution, you need to look at the problem. And the problem we had at that point in time was sending money. In Africa, we have an urban population and we have the rural population. So we have people who work in the cities, then they send money back home. And we had a challenge sending that money back home. So if Rachel is working in the city, she has someone at home. Everyone has a dependent. So you take your money, put in an envelope, go to the bus park, look for someone who looks trustworthy, give them the envelope, and hope it reaches with all the money there. But you know at least 50% of that will reach. So that was the problem that we had. So there was a pilot that was being done by our Department of Defense, DFID, that's the British High Commission, and they had a challenge sending salaries, wages and salaries to their employees who are working in the northern part of Kenya. So the northern part of Kenya is borders Somalia, Sudan, and Ethiopia, and they tend to be not stable. So they have a lot of workers who work around that area in the refugee camps. So sending salaries and wages was a problem because there is no brick and mortar. The banks are not there. So if you have a salary, your salary comes to a bank that's in the city, yet you're not in the city. So the first pilot was sending money to someone else, P2P. And the pilot worked very well until the Department of Defense came to M-Pesa and told M-Pesa, can we roll this out as a product? Because we have this problem of sending money to the rural areas. Let's use it as a use case. Fortunately, M-Pesa was running under Safaricom, which is a telco. So the telco has infrastructure. The base stations are all over the country. So that helped because in the camps, there's a base station because people still need to communicate. And everyone will have, if you're employed, you definitely have a mobile phone, even if it's a very low-end phone. So that worked. And in a year, they were able to get 1 million customers. So that was a success. And we started registering the normal population to start sending money, not just to the village, but even to the other people who are near you. So if I owe Arch some money, I just get his phone number, I send him money there. So that was the first use case, P2P, and it worked, solved a problem immediately, and it just blew. It's still one of the largest revenue earners for the M-Pesa platform, sending money to other, and also sending money to other platforms. So the second use case was actually merchant payments, which is consumer to business. I want to pay for utilities, I want to pay for electricity, water, which makes sense because, again, we have the urban population, we have the rural population. The rural population tend to be net receivers, whereas the urban population are the ones who actually work and send money home. So if you send money home, you might as well pay the electricity yourself, pay the water yourself, because not everyone will actually use the money when you send it for what it's supposed to be. So you'll send money home for electricity, for school fees, then in the middle of the month, you're called and told, okay, you know, I think we needed to buy shoes instead, so we didn't pay for electricity, so it's been disconnected. So it actually made merchant payments easier, where you can actually pay for goods and services at the comfort of your desk. And that was our second use case that really grew. Now, the third use case was international money transfer. And our first partner was Western Union. So again, in Africa, we have a lot of people who work outside in the diaspora, and they send money home again. So what do? If you use Western Union, the use case was you go to, when someone sends you money, you get a short code. Now that short code, you actually go to a Western Union branch, you give the short code, then you receive your money. So when we integrated with Western Union, the money actually comes to your mobile phone into your M-Pesa wallet. So when money is in your M-Pesa wallet, you can now use it to pay for electricity, you can use it to send to other. So the whole convenience and efficiency of being able to get money from someone who's in the diaspora in your mobile wallet is really unparalleled. You save on bus fare going to the Western Union branch. So international money transfer became our use case that really brought in Forex money into our ecosystem. So that was the third use case. Then the fourth is the one that everyone is talking about, credit. M-Shwari. M-Shwari is a Kiswahili word meaning relax or be comfortable. So for credit, this very important use case because as you've heard, less than 30% of our population was banked at that time. So you'll find we have very many small and medium enterprises that don't make enough money to be able to open a bank account. So what you do is, if Rachel is running a side hustle, so to speak, she sells, let's say, shoes from the boot of her car. So she sells to her colleagues. Then she tells them, send me money on my M-Pesa. So I keep receiving money for goods and services, but on my personal line. But if I want to expand my business, I will not be able to get credit in a bank because they don't have a credit history of my transactions. But when M-Shwari came, they were able to look at the transactions that you do on your M-Pesa line, whether it's sending money to you're paying bills, whether you're sending money to your parents, whether you're sending money for something that you've been buying. You're able to take those transactions, give you a credit limit, and then you keep borrowing based on that. Then the more you borrow and repay, the higher your limit, and you keep growing. So your business, even though it's tagged to your phone number, you still have a credit line that keeps growing. And that has really grown our merchant ecosystem. Because our Lipa na M-Pesa, which is pay with M-Pesa, the merchants are really the lower tier merchants. You actually make your profits day by day. You buy your inventory every day. You don't really plan for a week because you don't have that kind of money. But if people pay you on M-Pesa, you're able to get a credit limit, you're able to grow your business, and for us, that's what financial inclusion is. Availability of credit instruments or availability of accounting instruments to people who are underprivileged, who don't even know that they actually need that. So the good thing about M-Pesa is you have an organizational account as an M-Pesa customer. And you can get statements, you can see what has actually come through at the end of the day. You can, so long as you have a USSD, you can go to your phone and you can see your transactions. So for merchant, creating the merchant network, that was unparalleled for us. And it has really been our story of financial inclusion. We've been able to do term loans where you get a 7-day loan or a 30-day loan at a certain interest rate, and you pay at the end of that period. Last year, November, we were able to launch Overdraft, which is basically the bank overdraft facility, but on your phone. So again, the bullseye segment being the merchants, where I need to buy product in the morning because I need to sell it at the end of the day, I pay based on your transactions that go to your mobile phone. The change in this product is when you get an overdraw, it doesn't go to your wallet. It actually goes to the person you're paying. So if I want to buy, let's say, milk, I own a shop, I want to buy milk in wholesale so that I can sell during the day. When I actually request for an overdraw, the money will go to the supplier. So that hinders the fact that I might get the money, then I get another emergency, then I decide to use the money for something else. So that's something we've done in credit. Fantastic product, growing very well. We really don't have the information on the defaulters yet. It's still on the upward curve, crossing our fingers that it stays like that. So at the point we started, we were at 26%. That's 2006. When we look at the FSD, Financial Services Deepening Statistics, financial inclusion in 2006 was at 26.7% before M-Pesa started. So they just did another survey this year in March, and financial inclusion in Kenya has grown to 83% because of mobile money. And that has been something that we've worked. We actually look at it as we've been helped by the regulator. I remember when M-Pesa started, there was no regulation on mobile money. So what happened was the Central Bank of Kenya gave us a letter of no objection. Like, you've explained to us what this is. It's money moving from one mobile phone to another mobile phone. What we need to know is, where is the KYC? We need to know who are these people you're moving money to. And that was the first point of KYC. We need to know who these people are. We need to know who's your source of funds. And we were able to run for from 2006 to 2014, when the National Payments Act came into place by the legal fraternity and mobile money operators in Kenya, and we were given a license in 2014. So the regulator is very key, because you'll find the regulator is a custodian of the law. So they will not be very big on innovation. However, they need to be able to let the private sector innovate, because the private sector will be able to innovate because they are driven by profit. But now the balance between profit and regulation is what makes a product successful. And that has been we've been able to achieve that in Kenya because of that. Yes, there are fights, as Malith mentioned, where last year we got taxed. We started being taxed on the mobile money. That was part of the act, because before, the mobile money transactions were not being taxed. So the tax was loaded onto the mobile money transactions as well. Before, it just used to be on bank transactions, and mobile banking was also not being taxed. So of course, when you raise the tax, you raise the price, you have to give a new tariff sheet in the middle of the year, because the government has given a new tariff. There's uproar in the market, and customers start saying the product is expensive. I see my time is over. I'll hand over to Nat, but thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. It's very impressive what you've been doing. And actually, I was going to ask you a question about the regulator, so you've already answered that. Because what we've seen, I mean, the topic here is actually how can government and private cooperate? And what should governments do? Or rather, what shouldn't they do? Because in most countries, whether developed or not, banking regulations are for yesterday's way of doing banking. And that's a hindrance for fintech and development all over the world. And what we've seen in the country solutions that's been successful is that the regulator has been part of this, not designing the products in any way, but making sure that you have regulation that allows this kind of development. That's why Alipay is so successful in China, because they changed the rules. Not the same rules that were for the incumbent banks or Visa or MasterCard. They made different rules that made WeChat Pay and Alipay successful. And I think you have the same in Kenya with M-Pesa. So that being said, and we're almost running out of time, and I think people are thirsty for networking and cocktails and so on, but are there any questions in the audience? I think we have time for a few of them. Anyone wants to ask a question to this very interesting panel? Yes, we have a lady here. Please.
Дякую. Можливо, дуже дивне запитання, але навіть в Норвегії, яка кешлес майже 100%, ця послуга надзвичайно актуальна і дуже користуються нею люди. Запитання до представників Visa та MasterCard.
In the Ukraine, when you go to the supermarkets, in some areas there are no telling machines, so you use cash. In Norway, it's quite a topical thing, topical service. And maybe it's gonna come to my country, but I don't know if it's there. It's there, I can tell you, and we're working on it. We needed to launch this service. It took us quite a while to do it, because this service is not standard. In cash desks, in cash registries, cashiers can accept cash, but issuing cash, that's a different fiscal transaction. A lot was done by banks, associations, and the NBU to make it happen. We appreciate it. It took us a couple of years to prepare everything for this service and launch it. We did it in late November jointly with a partner bank, private bank, and the chain of filling stations, Vogue. And if you make a transaction starting 1 hryvnia and more, you can get up to 500 hryvnia back in cash. And I think by doing this, we can see that there are people living in villages, and They have limited access to financial services, but now they can come to the filling station, gas station to buy some tea and coffee, which is what they never did before, and they can get some cash. Again, you can get up to 500 hryvnia in cash, irrespective of the amount you purchased for. Knut had a question about the regulator. These new things should be well thought out by the regulator, like the National Bank, but also there are tax offices, tax authorities, which should also be a part of the deal, and you have to check with them to avoid failures. So we have to be thinking of that. Cash can only be given if you do a commercial transaction. Otherwise, you won't be able to get any cash. So will this thing be continued on? Sure, it will be continued, and we will cover more than just some gas station chains.
I mean, what Alipay and the Chinese have been doing, they've been using QR codes. So basically, you only need to print your QR code and put it on the register, and anyone can pay to you. What we've done in Norway, we have, like M-Pesa, an app where you can do peer-to-peer payments with your mobile phone number. Small shops and street vendors and so on, they can also have an account there with just a 5-digit number. So you can just add that number and make a payment. And it was actually 2 years ago, I saw the first drug user beggar on the street with a small sign that I accept mobile payment. Think of it, because people don't have cash anymore. So it's very hard to be a beggar with your cup asking for money. So you don't need a terminal to make it work. There are other, and I think, I don't remember if it was Visa or MasterCard showed us today, you can have 2 mobile phones transferring money with NFC.
That was Visa.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
Yeah. У мене питання до керівників Visa і Mastercard.
I have a question for Visa and Mastercard and maybe some other panelists. We all have cards, deposit cards and credit cards. We all are financially literate in here. If we have a card and we have a banking tariff on that, this tariff accounts for 2, 3, up to 5 pages. Small lettering, very complicated kind of wording. It's even hard for us to see what's the message, what's the point. So here is my question. When we speak about financial inclusion, we might think of simplified tariffs. Well, imagine there is a card and you get tariffs for this card, like 5 of them, without asterisks and footnotes, references to other papers, documents. So we have to simplify the tariffs. It might be a big amount and charges might be high, but it's gonna be something simple and understandable to all of the locals that are still unbanked in this country. Do you think it makes any sense? And if it does, how can we make it happen? I don't think it can be done by commercial banks alone. I think they should work jointly with the providers. I apologize. I have to say that there might be a short answer to this, yes or no, because what you're asking is about yes or no. No, I don't know how can we make it happen, so I wonder what you think. I guess next year we're gonna see emerging solutions like what you're talking about based on tariffs. Right now there is one tariff for all and it's gonna be gone in the nearest future. You also have the artificial intellect, which could offer you the best tariff. There are systems that have been taught to do it, and there should be a proportioned approach. So I'm sure that the banks will hear it, review their practices, and there's going to be a growing demand for these kinds of solutions. So you have customized plastic stuff that customers might prefer, they'll get it. But there's going to be a plentiful choice. I guess the banking community is working on this actively, so it's a good question. Sometimes it's really hard to see what's it all about. Some existing packages simplify the tariff plans in the banks, and it makes it easier. Some banks use smart pricing. As an active client, you show your activity to these banks, then the tariff plan can be gone. So we're moving along these lines. So I think you should expect changes very soon, and it's going to be an easier deal for all of us.
Unfortunately, time is over. I think we could keep on discussing this for quite a few hours. So I want to thank the entire panel. Very interesting speaks from all of you. And I'm sure we can continue afterwards and the break as well. Thank you very much.